Um, Welcome everyone to the Town of Mills River Planning Board meeting for March 4th, 2025. Go on. Why don't we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Okay, so first item is the approval of tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Motion to approve.
We have a first motion from Mike. Second? Oh, we'll go with Billy on that one, hot button. And we have a vote to approve. I'll say aye. Aye. Moving on to staff updates. So approval of the minutes first. Let's do that first. Do we have someone who has reviewed and would like to make a motion to approve the February 4th meeting minutes? Thank you, Lonnie. Thank you, Jenny. Would we like to vote on that motion to approve the minutes from the February 4th meeting? I'll say aye. And now, Michael, do you have any staff updates for us?
Just a couple brief updates about some construction happening around the town. I don't know if this was shared with the planning board, but a while ago, we issued the approval for a new dental office at the corner of Jeffress and Boylston Highway next to the Valvoline. They gave us just notice, I think just last week, that their contractor should be mobilizing on site within the next week or so. So if you see construction or contractors near that intersection, that's for that project. It's a 4,000 square foot dental office and new commercial site, again, next to the Valvoline. Additionally, hot off the press, got an email from our Publix developers, the new shopping center. They also said they're going to be mobilizing contractors in the next 3 to 4 weeks, so the next month. No firm timeline on that. And again, that could push if there's delays due to weather. But again, in that Boylston Highway corridor around Jeffress to Old Haywood Road, we're going to start seeing some development activities. So again, if people are asking, just put that out in the community. And as always, if there's complaints or issues or public safety concerns with those projects, anyone feel free to reach out to staff, and we have a direct line with those folks to address any issues.
Can I ask a question on public?
A question I've been asked, I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it, that is going to be brought for Publix is going to be brought down to grade.
The site will be mass graded, but the amount of dirt they push around will still result in a site that is above grade of Boylston Highway.
So it will be.
Correct.
Okay, so the net gain of volume of dirt, it sounds like is moving and compacting and engineered. What is the back going to be is that in the master plan?
Like
the grade at the back of the hill, if you will.
Up to the residential properties.
Yeah, is there going to be a retaining wall there that you know of, or is that going to be like hydro seeded?
There used to be a retaining wall. They've eliminated it. They were able to secure a grading easement from those private property owners.
There it is. Okay, I've been asked. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Perfect. Thanks.
Now there will be retaining walls at other parts of the site.
Right, but the residential. There's a lot of these miniature landslides at Helene that they're just all over the county. I mean. Thank you.
That's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Board comments and updates. Does anyone have any items they'd like to bring to attention here? I have one, but I open the floor first to you all. Okay.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, okay.
Take some water. If really want to.
You missed your opportunity. Yeah, really want to take a second to thank staff. Last week was huge. The last couple of weeks, that training, I didn't realize the UDO was even looking into that. I didn't realize that was even part of it. Okay, so we got to talking the other day, and well, besides Mr. Foster, I think I've been here barely 2 years, and everyone else, Lonnie, I came right after you, right? I think we've learned more since that voluntary annexation conversation triggered some critical thinking over here on this side of the table and asking questions. And I really feel that that training that we had last week shows us that we have a lot more clout than we thought we had. And I say clout in conviction, in terms of conviction to that comprehensive plan, not as in pushing an agenda that we have, but really pushing the public agenda, which is that comprehensive plan and Flume. And I would just really encourage everyone to embrace that slide that Michael sent out. That was the meeting we had last week. We're actually held to a lot more.
Well, I didn't realize the significance of the role of a planning board dictated, that's not the right word, but created or by the legislature, you know, that you have an independent role that's significant and proactive and, you know, public input or not having public input or whatever. It's a pretty significant role and has a significant purpose, which is obviously for zoning and planning in the town, including the comprehensive map. I thought it was interesting to know that much significance of what we're tasked with doing, so.
Yeah, it was definitely very informative, and I think provides a lot of avenues for follow-up, both kind of procedurally, substantively, and you know, in terms of our action items over the course of the year.
I think it took it a step further than just that we could, it's that we should.
Right.
And I think that really changes how we should be looking at this.
Well, I think being proactive, not reactive. So.
The other item I just wanted to bring to the attention of the board is on Thursday, the town council is having one of its, I think it's 2026 vision planning meeting, and specifically with regards to the budget. And the planning board has been invited to, or I was invited to speak on behalf of the planning board at that meeting, and have, you know, 5 to 10 minutes to mention or bring to the town council's attention any items that would be of interest for, or that we would want their attention on for budget kind of 2026 from a planning board perspective. That meeting, I believe, is open to the public, and it is from 3 until 6 p.m. 3 till 7 p.m. on Thursday, March 6th. So just a couple of notes, or kind of just from my perspective. Unfortunately, I am unlikely to be able to attend, although if I had a little bit more specificity on when planning board might need to speak on behalf of the planning board, that could help. But in any event, Brian has volunteered to go in my place. And so I guess what I'd like to put up to the board's discussion is, you know, if you have any thoughts about things we might want to bring to town council's attention with regard to how or what we might budget for on behalf of the planning board.
It is 3 o'clock Thursday, right? That's what I'm saying. The visioning, they call it, or wish list, I call it. That's really what it is.
That's what they said, 3 to 7
Yeah,
is what she
Is
said.
it
Yeah.
just on the
4 hours.
budget?
yeah, it's a long meeting.
On budget?
It's basically the budget kickoff for council.
Okay.
It's cut, the term is budget visioning session,
Has
but
the planning-
it's the
has
kickoff of their financial plan.
Has the planning board historically, not hysterically, but historically, slip of the tongue there. Historically, you know, requested any funding to do anything, or?
No, and usually there's not been a presentation.
Yeah.
Usually it's done with staff. Historically, it's usually the Parks and Recreation chair that goes, because Parks and Recreation is more capital intensive
Yeah.
than the Planning and Zoning Department. But again, I think the new town manager wanted to keep it open for all to participate, just in case.
You'll be making a presentation,
Correct.
obviously. And we've got the UDO, but that's happening already. We don't have
Yeah, and I did pull up my slides for that meeting. So I mean, if you wanted a couple of the upcoming projects or budget considerations for the department, I'm happy to rattle a few of those off, but again, don't want to step on the board's.
Well, that's, as you know, that was a question I was going to ask during additional items. So
Yeah.
if
it's
we
a-
need, I don't
if
know when the appropriate time is to do the back and forth, but this is what I wanted to hear more of
About,
from
Michael on.
well,
the-
from everybody up here.
Yeah.
Is there, we're not a board that speaks for money. We don't get to ask for a pickleball court that costs X amount of dollars like the Parks Committee does. One of the things we spitballed earlier today was what money would we spend? And the only thing we could come up with was if we wanted the attorney here to explain Law 57 to us, would she charge us for her time? I mean, that's like the only thing we could come up with to spend money.
Well, or if the planning, I mean, and maybe the question is whether this is sort of what is in mind of what we could use that time for. If the planning board anticipated, maybe proposing some kind of text amendment that might require, that would only be effective if it were funded. For example, and I know we're going to talk about this later, but if we had, now, as I understand it, we as a planning board can't create a bounty on Bartlett pear trees or but if we have a landscaping ordinance that maybe contemplated some sort of buyback program, that would obviously be something that we could recommend, and then town council, if they were to adopt that, then that would only be something that town council could implement if they had budgeted for it. So I think that was sort of an issue. We thought, well, what about sort of, would that be something that town council would be wanting, would be receptive to hearing from us in this type of meeting?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of an idea for a program that is kind of on the borderline of what our department does, but would take funds to implement.
Yeah.
So I think that would be an appropriate.
So again,
item
it
to
wouldn't be
bring
like
up.
funds for the planning board to spend, but sort of to give a path for if we were to recommend something along those lines. And so that if town council adopted something, it wouldn't just sit dead for a year until 2027. It would be something that perhaps they could act on in
I guess
fiscal year
even if we
2026.
offered for recommending any text amendments that then would require a public hearing, that's money that's spent for notification, things like that. So I don't know if that's something that we have to take into consideration for budget process, or is that built into the budget from town council, or?
I built that into our departmental budget, so there's specific like advertisement and mailing line items, both for the Board of Adjustment and Planning Board. So that's where those funds fall. For council public hearings, I think there's also line items in the administrative budget for their needs as well, for mailings, notices.
Yeah, so that was the only, I mean, I think in terms of like town attorney potentially, and again.
That was the only direct cost we
Yeah,
could come
direct
up with.
cost, right,
But
that's-
anything that we suggest to the council that could cost money, like if, we're not going to do a survey, but if we requested, if we had some huge plans and we were requesting a survey, we could say, hey, there's a big thing coming up that we were going to be asking of you.
Right.
But directly, I don't know that we could spend anything.
No, I think again, the question is really to the board if there are other, the one that kind of came to my mind was to the extent we want to propose anything with respect to the landscaping ordinances and, encouragement of native and removal of invasive type species, which is something I know we'll talk about in a little bit. I think that would be a nice thing to flag for town council, and whether anyone, I know it's sort of a spontaneous, but if anyone else has something they might.
I mentioned the public works, the basic public works, maybe some type of start or something. I think the town should look at something more than just parks for the benefit of the citizens.
Yeah.
Well, I've been in several of those visioning meetings. And it's really, like I said, it's working towards the budget, and it's open to the public, and they've always, anybody has an idea, that's what it is, to present your ideas. And so, and if town council can come up with a workable solution, they're considered as they go on the budget for the next year. But it's just an open meeting. That's what it's always been.
So at council, last council, I was talking about the National Park Service layoffs or firings and whatnot, and the fact that we, as a community, really don't want to lose that kind of highly educated, centered person that's already either works here or lives here. And that's also kind of tied to the invasive, what we do with the invasives, because those people can identify them. And if we could make maybe a carve out that is for like a 1099 or an internship or something, so that they can go out and help the residents identify and maybe even cut them down for them if we decide against the bounty or something of that nature. I would really like to see us rally behind our ecologically minded folks and give them something to do to help them survive until our federal government can figure out what it's going to do for itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail, but I think, again, if it's something that we can preview for town council, because ultimately how and the scope of that and the budget behind that will be
But
entirely
is
driven
the
by
invite
them.
for the staff at the meeting or for the members of the committee? Of the board, excuse me.
So I think I think the board, each member of the board has been invited to speak, and it sounds as though as well, any member of the public could also attend and speak on behalf of themselves.
Yeah, I think the intent was to invite the chair of each advisory committee that, you know, could be spending funds for some type of program or their designee. So in this place, it sounds like Mr. Ross is going to be stepping in. Of course, the meeting's open to the public and anyone else is welcome to attend.
Exactly.
Any other subjects anybody wants brought up? We don't have a lot of, I mean, it's Thursday, so I'll be here and say whatever you guys want me to say. I just want to, if you don't come up with something now on short notice, because this isn't, the planning board's never, the chair had never been invited to this before, right? Correct. Yeah, so this was just, but if you have something the next day and a half that you think of, reach out to me. I want to, this is more just get it on their radar. We don't
Yeah.
have a specific ask. Like,
No,
you know,
no,
a
not-
batting cage.
correct,
So,
correct. No. Any other comments that we want to share at this stage, or move on to the next, before we move on to the next agenda item? So we do have an opportunity for the public to speak. If the public would like to make any comment at this time. Great, please come to the podium, and we would love if you wouldn't mind sharing your name and could you ask for people's address? Yes,
Well,
please, if you don't mind.
I'm Rachel Rodriguez. I live on Sweetwater Road. I like listening to hear what the planning board is doing. I think you guys are doing a great job. I'm very interested to hear more tonight about this landscaping ordinance you're alluding to. I think that especially after the hurricane, trying to make sure that we maintain our natural biodiversity and really lean into native species is very important for our community, and I'm excited to hear more about it. So thank you for working on that.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Okay, hearing no other comment from the public, do we have, we do not have any old business to discuss. And moving on to our new business, which is I think a proposed text amendment 2501. Is that, Michael, would you like to kick that off?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So you'll remember this from the last meeting. Staff came forward requesting a text amendment to correct an inconsistency in the community center future land use district in the comprehensive plan. And again, this has been called out, the last two rezonings, which have both been in that district, that basically there's this inconsistency where both industrial uses are mentioned as being promoted or wanted in the district, specifically in the long form description on page 30 of the comp plan. And then on page 31, where there's the land use chart, it's listed as a not desirable use. And again, staff's concern was if that inconsistency continues, it just is not clear in terms of the guidance provided to staff, our board, and then council for zoning text or map amendment decisions. So at the last meeting, staff requested to initiate a text amendment to have industrial uses included in the district, and the planning board chose to initiate the text amendment to not include them in the district. But I did some additional, actually Kevin did some additional research, and we found in the old public engagement files for the comprehensive plan a land use map, kind of similar to what we did in the public forum with the UDO, but basically calling out that industrial uses, doesn't say desirable, but basically folks were asked to identify areas of the town where those uses may be appropriate.
Is this attachment C we're looking at? The
That's
dots,
correct, and I'm
stickers?
just
Oh,
pulling it
okay.
up here. So the area we're talking about, and I'll kind of highlight it here on the screen, is this segment here. Again, the eastern section of Schoolhouse Road, east of Banner Farm, south of Haywood. So again, staff is staying consistent with our interpretation that industrial uses should be included. They don't have to be desirable, but we thought acceptable was a potential option to still include them in the community center district. So really, I'm happy to answer additional questions, but what's before you tonight are the two options for this text amendment. The one staff is recommending, which has industrial uses as an acceptable use in the community center future land use district, and then the option planning board chose in terms of initiating the text amendment that industrial uses should be struck from the land use chart. So going forward here, we've got our land use vision map. So again, in the red, you can see the community center district. In attachment, I can't see that on the screen. E is staff's version of the text amendment, where basically industrial is moved from the not desirable to the acceptable column. And there's a statement of consistency that supports that. And then there's text amendment option 2, which is what the planning board chose to initiate, which is striking the word industrial from the longhand description in the community center district. And there's a statement of consistency supporting that as well.
Where was industrial
Oh, I'm sorry.
added? Yeah, okay. No,
Oh, where?
this one there.
Oops, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
So it's in blue, additions are in blue, subtractions are in red. So I didn't feel desirable was correct, but again, just based on the input, I thought acceptable was acceptable.
I don't remember. I knew we were removing it from not desirable. I didn't know we were moving it to acceptable.
I think I think what you want to look at is attachment E versus attachment G, if I understand.
Correct.
There's the kind of options we're being presented with is either to make it consistent, we leave it in the description of community center, but move it from not desirable to acceptable based on what staff found from a session in the Making Mills River.
Okay.
Or the other alternative is that it would be struck from community center completely, and then it's also being removed from the community center description. Is that correct?
Well, so excuse me. So the second option that the planning board talked about at the last time is basically striking it from the description and then leaving it as
As a
not
not
desirable
desirable,
in the
right,
chart.
okay, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, fair enough.
So
Right.
it's one or the other, and these are really just two options for the planning board's considering.
Yeah, so one amends the land use by category chart and the other would amend the description of community center in the land use vision map categories.
Correct. And again, option one, staff's option is to keep it in the district, in the chart and in the description. Option two, I'll just call it the planning board's option, is to strike it from the longhand description and keep it as not desirable in the land use chart.
You said that last mouthful again. I think
Yes.
that's what we need to hear.
Staff's recommendation or option one is to include industrial as an acceptable future land use. Let me get to the right page here.
The
And it is already in the longhand description. That's the inconsistency. So we're just changing one of the documents
So you're moving it from not desirable to acceptable here in the chart.
and leaving the
and leaving it
longhand
in the
description.
Longhand description.
Yes.
That's option one, which is what was brought to us last time, although it's an acceptable now.
Mhm.
And then the other option would be striking industrial from the longhand description and then leaving it as is in the future land use chart, which is not desirable. So either way, we address the inconsistency. It's just a decision of whether those industrial uses should be there or not.
And one of the things you're adding this time is attachment C, which is the input.
And how does this input, so can you go back to the dot map and how does this input convey community input? I know you said this, but now if we can just
No, you're
like
fine.
yeah, how does this map show that our community input was that they wanted industrial included in community center? Like how do I read that from here?
Just the geographic location. And again, it's not going to be all of it. In the last meeting, my recommendation was to amend the area the community center district covers versus changing the description. And so again, my concern is this area here, again, between Schoolhouse, Haywood, and Banner Farm, that industrial was called out by the citizens as, and again, I don't have the appropriate terminology, but possibly an appropriate land use for that area. Obviously, you see that up at the Broad Point Industrial Park as well.
Right.
And then, again, from staff's perspective, again, we're taking the whole comp plan into account and also thinking 20 years into the future. And I know some comments at the last meeting were, well, we have industrial parks, that's where it should go. There's only 2 parcels left to develop. So if Mills River, wants to continue accommodating industrial uses and have that type of tax base to potentially offset residential taxes, we would need areas to accommodate future industrial development. Right now, there's 1 parcel left in the Ferncliff Industrial Park, and there's a small, maybe 7-acre parcel in the Broad Point Industrial Park, and then the Brown Ridge property, which is 70 acres, but we've also heard is not well suited for large-scale industrial development. So that, along with the public input, and then again, staff's consistent interpretation through the past 2 rezonings, again, we're just staying consistent with what we've seen, and this was all we were able to find to back that up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to point out on here that the dot map. Sorry, the dot map is the public input. The vast majority, somebody, I can tell who it was, came through on the south side of Schoolhouse Road, happy with red stickers, and put 9 of them there. 2 of them are on my property down in the floodplain. So 6 of them are the field next door to me, 1 property owner, and the other ones are where Bold Rock is right now.
And forgive me for not listening, perhaps, where did this come from?
No,
From
it's
the
2019, right?
from the
2019.
from the public input
Right.
sessions, a summary of them from the Making Mills River comp plan input. Yeah, fall of 19. So basically like the UDO public forum, they did multiple of those. This is an accumulation of all of that. And then I attached the slides after the fact, again, just to show the context of it.
And if you look at those dots and how they translated later on to the future land use map, you'll see that that entire area south of Schoolhouse stayed rural residential. And only to the north was it marked red. There's a lot of stickers there, but it's only 3 properties and one of them's mine. I would also point out all the green stickers at the Britton farm and all the green stickers at the Fulham farm. Guess what? Those aren't going to be green stickers anymore. Different agenda item, but those are all going to change to yellow. In fact, Britton farm already has. I'm sorry.
You finish your thought.
No, Michael's point is taken though. The commercial area, whether it's the little blue area on the future land use map, industrial area, whether it's a little blue area there, or if we expand it to the community centers, it has a max capacity at some point, right? You run out at some point. I mean, if I was waving my wand, we'd run out up there where all that red is and not expand and give them more place to run out at. I get the argument for taxes. I get the argument for if we're going to have it, it's got to have somewhere to go. But counterpoint is you have to stop at some point. Otherwise, all these stickers keep changing colors to the less desirable, just like they're doing in front of our eyes right now. This is 6 years ago.
And when I think of community center, you know, I really put more weight on those. I want to see them more often in that red district. Somebody, just a reason. You know, whoever lives next to that, they decide to sell to someone, maybe an office or like a duplex or something like that, to keep it within that kind of desirable slate instead of another large swath of land being designated to a warehouse or a plant, because they do take up more surface area.
A great reminder there on what is desirable in community center. When I add the word industrial to this, industrial just stands out. I mean, the current list is civic and community, parks and public space, trails and recreation, schools, retails, restaurants, offices, duplexes, townhomes, apartments. And then we just throw in industrial? That doesn't seem to match even close to me.
Why don't we get a quick, just sort of whether you're leaning option 1 or option 2, I think, just to kind of take a temperature of where we're at. Jenny, would you like to start?
Number 2.
Lonnie?
Well, I have some questions, but 2, yeah.
Jim?
I think I'm leaning to 2 at the present.
Okay, thank you. Billy?
1.
Okay. Brian?
I'm leaning to 2, and I like Mike, I have questions though. You asked where we were leaning.
Yeah, I'm just asking,
Yeah.
I think it's good. I just wanted, I think just so we can start to figure out a framework for the discussion and how, where the board is sort of starting point. I think it's just useful guidance. So
Well, and this is maybe it's a big question, but
I wouldn't expect anything less.
yeah. So it won't be worded correctly, and I'm afraid to ask Michael, but I'm going to anyway. But so I hear all the time in the last couple of years on the planning board, and this has to do, and you just mentioned it, was increasing the tax base. And this is where it's the big open question. What are we spending that money on as a town if we're increasing the tax base, and what's the purpose of increasing the tax base? And that's a big question. I apologize.
Services for the citizens. I mean, at some
But
point,
what services that?
well, if at some point the town wanted public safety in-house, that's always the common hypothetical. If the town wanted its own police department, that would be a large multi-million-dollar undertaking to build that up. You know, we also have the park expansion, obviously, next door. But again, those financial priorities, again, are set, through the manager and council with public input. But again, generally, I'm just thinking from the good government side that, and the land use side, that Mills River is very, very fortunate to have the diverse tax base it has, or else I think the town would be in a very different situation. So again, knowing that our industrial parks are full, and again, if it's the board's pleasure that those parks are there and that's where they should go, that's completely fine too. But again, I just thought the public input, there was a reason it was in there, and again, it just seems odd that the inconsistency was put in there, and it was in there from the first drafts, and either no one ever caught it or someone did it purposefully. So I don't have the answer.
No, and it was more of a learning question for me, because at one of the meetings last week, the only road that Mills River itself pays for is the road coming into this park, and then the only, I guess, that's the biggest expense, I assume, is the maintaining and expanding this park, correct? But expanding the tax base is under the assumption, and I'm just learning. Expanding the tax base is under the assumption, and Lonnie alluded to it earlier, and I know others feel this way, that we may expand services available to the residents or the inhabitants of Mills River, and therefore we need the tax base to expand to be able to do that at some point in the future, which is what you alluded to.
If I may-
And I'll turn it to Kristen in a second. It's in the comp plan. And so if you look at my statement of consistency for option one, half of it is about the comp plan calling for an expanded tax base to support long-term fiscal responsibility of the town and to have adequate capacity to support job development.
Yeah.
So again, staff's feeling was when we looked through the comp plan, again, no preference either way. I found more objectives there that supported this, and I felt it was, important in my responsibility to bring this back to the board's attention. And Kristen's gonna, as our new tax collector, gonna give us a quick lesson on taxes.
Please, please.
So the difference in between a personal residential tax versus having business tax is the fact that the services that each one consumes. So residential, it's almost dollar for dollar cost to serve the residents as it does for the taxes taken in. Whenever you have commercial and especially industrial, it is far less for fire, safety, all those services that we provide. So you do actually net more money from those taxes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and yes, no, it makes complete sense. I'm just, from Mike Cole's own personal, for me personally, I just want to know why we're expanding the tax base. There's a purpose there, and you just alluded to it, and Michael just alluded to it as well. So, in other words, if we're making decisions, I just want to know what that is, and that's part of my decision-making process. And one other comment that I have is a lot of the red area on that map, which is community center, which is where you're saying there is room to expand businesses and that sort of thing, but there are also residential neighborhoods within that, which is what gives me pause. Because if we want to think about taking the big picture look, rural residential and those sorts of things, I would rather see, more employment, industrial needed for an expanding tax base, and that makes sense to me now. I'd rather see it in a compacted area like the red on the map. But that I don't know if we can ignore the impact to the residents of those neighborhoods there. I don't know how to balance that. I don't know.
And my thinking too is these new things that we might look at in the future doesn't necessarily have to have added tax revenue. As the parks in the recreation area should reach a plateau, at some point where it doesn't need much more than maintenance. We're not buying more land or adding out, and we can use the monies for something else,
I'd like to make my comment. I've said this before, and it may not be totally relevant to this, but we're talking about expanding the tax base. Well, I just think if more money comes in, somehow it gets spent, always does. We're a small town and let's just remain that way. And the subject keeps coming up about police force. That would be probably the biggest mistake this town could make, I think, because there's no way you could even come near what we are actually paying, starting a police force, if you could find the personnel to staff it. And the other thing that keeps coming up is sewer. That would be a big mistake also, try to get in the garbage pickup business. Everywhere, and I hate to even mention this, but I come from second largest town in Georgia, and how they survived with the city being in the garbage business was they used county prisoners, and it was a volunteer deal because those prisoners would fight you to get on that garbage pickup because that give them opportunity. They paid them a small amount, but they have survived. But they still have a lot of problems. But I know some of these other private companies, some of the bigger ones here is not good. Fortunately, over there where we contract with one of the best and have been for years. And when it came up a few years ago about garbage pickup, we're not paying over there about a third of what it would cost you to contract with one of the bigger companies. So that's just my take on increasing the tax base, I guess.
What I'm hearing from you is that increasing the tax base doesn't seem to be a justification
No.
for increased or.
We just need to learn we're a small town, close knit. We need to learn to live within our means, so to speak. And we don't necessarily, every year, people say, well, we got to have a yearly increase. Why? We learn to budget and live within what we have if we want to maintain the rural atmosphere. If not, pretty soon you're going to be Asheville. That's my take.
Billy, would you like to share where you're?
Well, I know I went with option one.
Yes.
I really think we need to think about what our businesses does for us. Has anybody really went to Mills River School to see what Northland does for them over the years?
I would love to tell.
I mean, it's just, this has nothing to do with the money. But they met with Mill River School before they ever built. And everybody was happy with it. Okay. More than 100 of the employees, they voiced their concerns about safety. But anyway, Northland really supports Mills River School.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not nothing big, but the subdivision on the other side has never done nothing to Mills River School.
Right.
But I mean, it's not nothing big. They allow them to park there. That's nothing big. And they contribute to the school for functions. They furnish shirts and stuff they just do a whole lot for Mills River School. Anyway, I feel like, we've got to have our business. We're going to let all these people come in and do somewhere to work.
I think when we think between these two options, and I may be wrong, but option number one says we're just moving one thing to make it consistent with the entire plan that was created in 2021. Where if we go with option two, which we have the right to do, I think, as a planning board, but if we go with option two, then we're making a material change to this rather than writing what's probably a wrong, right? But we're making a pretty big material change if we go with option two.
And
And I don't think we thought about all of the other ramifications of that. So.
So I don't think that industry doesn't have impact. I mean, they definitely do. But we can't cap it this. I mean, there's nothing with us, that's stopping us from making another district, correct? On the south end?
Well, we can recommend it,
Or
but we,
recommend-
yeah.
No, I mean, if we want to keep industry here, which I'm all for, because it's great that we all have jobs. But if we're being confined by the north part, and we've got mostly residential and then schools and some industry there, and we want to kind of cap it so that the rest of the desirables can kind of come in, offices and duplexes and stuff like that. And then suggest another area, doesn't have to be the south, but just any other area, for industry to maybe find another center for.
I was kind of in the same line of thinking, this change, well, either change doesn't impact the existing industry around Mills River School, you know, in that pocket right there. It doesn't, it's not gonna.
Doesn't change anything that's
the-
allowed by right. This
yeah,
isn't a
it doesn't-
zoning question.
Yeah, it doesn't change anything. It just is a reflection of what the community would, what we understand the community would desire to match these different categories. Community center, I mean, we have a category for industrial and industrial and employment that is fully serving industry. It seems quite, and it's, of course, it has been there this whole time, and it's been an inconsistency present in the whole time, but it seems very much like an anomaly for industry to show up as an acceptable use when the desirable use is to promote community centers, trails, schools, offices, duplexes. It does seem very much contrary to that, particularly when industry has its own carved out category. And again, it wouldn't impact the existing industrial sites. It doesn't change anything that's already zoned industrial. And in any event, we could recommend additional areas for industry.
And I agree, and to what Ms. Seeley said, the future land use map, and again, remember what our consultant said last week, y'all are keepers of this plan. So this text amendment may not be the correct way to address this. Again, it was just an inconsistency we wanted to get ironed out. If we want a larger undertaking, which is looking at the future land use map and saying, hey, you know, even this community center district, maybe without industrial, shouldn't be back on Kimsey Road there. Or maybe the industrial, there should be a pocket here. Again, that's all stuff this board can initiate and look at as well. That would just be a future land use map amendment. Same process as a text amendment.
And I'd like to say, as far as North, we dodged the bullet on that. They have been good neighbors. There was a lot of opposition and discussion. I was on this board when that happened. We put a lot of hours into that one, and there's still a lot of opposition floating around out there. I'm well aware of. That's like I say, I think we dodged the bullet with them because they have been good neighbors and are still. But it could have easily went the other way.
I've said this before about good neighbors. Those are zero guarantee, none. And I don't, we have some great greenhouse owners as an example. You guys heard me say that specifically before. But if we just allow greenhouses in all these open flat spaces, which we do, but if they were all to fill in all of a sudden, it wouldn't matter how good neighbor they were. We would be overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And I'm going to cite, I'm sorry, I can't remember Chad's last name, our UDO guy. What's Chad's last name? Meadows, Mr. Meadows, you know, pointing out to us that not only do we need statements of consistency, but we need statements of reasonableness and public interest. And I'm going to weigh heavily on those two words, public interest. Is this, I've already heard the rezoning we did of the little 2-acre parcel at Schoolhouse and Banner Farm. Residents weren't happy. We kind of rubber stamped that, and I felt we should have, based on, the precedent that had been set there. But the net effect was, we went up square footage from, I think, 170,000 total to 240,000 total. That's adding up, and the public interest is saying they don't want that to add up. So to talk out of both sides of my mouth for a second, if I look at it strictly from correcting this, Michael, I'm a fan of 1.
Mhm.
If we just want to correct this, because I think the intent of when this was created is more in line with 1. So if I were to be asked, hey, would you consider doing that and then revisiting the entire comprehensive plan and future land use map and review it completely top to bottom? I would say I think that's acceptable, because I think based on our dot map here, my floodplain was supposed to have a big warehouse in it. So I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth when I say that. The tax base thing isn't a good argument for me, because no one in Mills River ever thought our homes were going to be worth what they're worth. And we have a massive amount of retail office space that they can still put in to collect that. So there's my comments on tax base and good neighbors and intent.
Simply remove industrial from the description of community center. Or move it on the category. Just moving one word right out.
Mhm.
It doesn't, the word industrial and description does not go with the desirable, as you said earlier.
I think number 2 is more proactive, progressive aspect. And I know that may be a lot to chew on right now.
I think public interest agrees with that, though. That's why I said out loud, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here.
But I would love to hold you to looking at the land use map constantly, like line by line.
All right.
Well, that's another discussion, yes.
Yeah.
You spoke.
But we've all agreed that we're going to take this seriously with this comprehensive plan and embracing that as one of our, as Mr. Meadows said, if we were to be taken to court as a board right here, that would be presented. And the question would be asked if we intended to advise based on that. It doesn't need change, does it need review top to bottom? Yeah, definitely.
So, given this, does anyone want to make a motion regarding pursuing an option that has been presented to us or offering an alternative?
I mean, Michael did say maybe one of these options isn't the option. Maybe it's something else.
Again, it sounds like this is it might be an immediate fix to an inconsistency, but maybe it is a guiding, how we address this issue could be a guiding light to how we might amend things in the future.
And have realized there's 2 lots left in the other area, and that has to be addressed. Makes sense, but the word industrial just doesn't fit in with the description of community center, either with all the other words that are under the map categories or land use.
Well, option 2 is attachment H, right?
Correct.
Correct. Can I,
Yes,
Jim, can I
you're
interrupt you
correct.
and ask Mike to confirm what he just said, please, before we, if you were
Yeah.
going to say something else, I really wanted to. If I heard one of the things you were alluding to there, Mike, was industrial doesn't fit. So for now, remove it and let's look at somewhere else to incorporate
Yeah, I mean.
some industrial space.
The description, I mean, on the other hand, in that red area, there are already warehouses, so.
Yeah, but they're all over though.
Point of view, but it doesn't, industrial just doesn't fit in the description of any other description on either of those pages for the uses of community center or the description of what's desirable.
I would say,
I agree with what Michael said, that I don't feel that it fits with the community center area
It's
either.
important, and we need to expand the type of all those things that fit in that description. So that's where if we're gonna make a change, I would just simply remove the word industrial from both pages. Otherwise, it's an undesirable on the other.
and I think to ground us in the statements of consistency, if we were to adopt one or the other, one of the things that was pointed out by staff was that there are a number of elements of support for option one in the comp plan. But to your point and to Jenny's point earlier, yes, there are a lot of, my read would be, there are a lot of reasons to support industry in the town, which we do, but that doesn't mean we need to encourage more industry in our community center when what might be more desirable is to just encourage and create more industrial zones.
Well, I can add to that and say, I mean, Jim lives, we both live in the
The red dots.
red dots, right?
Yep.
Okay, we have some residential, but we're probably the minority of spaces there. We have greenhouses, greenhouse manufacturers. We have this new one going in up there by Flavor First. You know, that area, I'm sorry, wrong. If I look at the future land use map, you know, let's just say south of Clement, thank you, south of Clement or Clement, and, you know, east of starting at Norfin and heading east, maybe that is a good spot for it because there's only a few of us houses there. So maybe that is a good spot. But then if you look at the whole red area there on the map, it goes, I believe it was Mr. Malachek pointed out, it goes all the way over past Old Turnpike to Kimsey. Maybe that's too far for a community center. And I know Michael already said this, but maybe we look at changing that and designating some of that space for industrial, but not all of it.
Right, which is changing the map
But we
to
can do
match
that.
to match
Public interest.
the use, but making the description of what the use is more in line with sort of what's reasonable.
Well, we can't just draw a line and again, Mr. Meadows asked us the other day, do you want it to be one big cluster or little clusters? Unfortunately, we've missed the opportunity for it to be one big cluster. Like the little hill that was brought down to grade at South Mills River Road. I mean, you can see that from Old Turnpike, right? I mean, it's all the way around the back. So that's in this area. I'm okay with that being industrial. But then just to the west of that, it's houses there's the old farm, the old dairy farm up there. I don't want industrial there. So I think we've missed the opportunity to make it one continuous spot. I'm sorry, it's going to be more choppy on the map than that.
Right, but right, so that the map, instead of the map being all red right here, the map should have pockets of red and pockets of blue.
Perhaps, or
Rather than the blue being backed into the red.
So-
By allowing industrial into so the red is community center. And the blue is industrial. What seems to be consistent with both this
right.
is that there should be.
There you go. That zooming in you started to do was it. That was the answer. There it is. There you go. There you go.
It sounds like what we might all be agreeing is that this, I'm gonna
There you go.
just bring this with me, right? This, maybe we need some blue here. But that doesn't mean that blue belongs in the description of community center. If we're keeping industry in the description of community center just to justify the blue that's existing here, it's two
Yeah.
separate things. What we want is community center to not include industry, but to also recognize that maybe we already
Parts
have
of
an
it do.
industrial center
Right, so I would
here.
remove industrial from community center and then later at some point address what's red and make it blue.
Yeah.
For lack of a.
I would agree with that. Was that a motion?
Script.
So if
Well,
everyone
that-
agreed to that, or if everyone understood what you said, I should have said.
We can't think beyond.
I think Billy made a great point. You know, good neighbors but That doesn't mean I want to give them all of that red area all the way over in Kimsey Road over there.
Right. Right.
So maybe there's sub areas within, because we don't have a clean map that we started with.
Right.
Right? Maybe there's a sub area within that,
That needs to
and
be.
you draw borders for within this community center. Industrial isn't actually not just acceptable,
But
but
encourage.
encouraged.
Absolutely.
You'd have to look at the land that's, available too, that could be available for.
Trust me, they're my neighbors. I know every one of them, and I don't want them there personally, but that's, hey, buyer beware. I bought that house there knowing that, right? So,
Yeah.
so we all have to eat a little bit of what I just said.
And the correct utilities also,
Unfortunately, it's all there already. There's no higher pressure development anywhere in this town than on flat level, out of the flood, cleared, fully serviced land, and that is Schoolhouse Road.
That's right.
There's not a place in this town that has higher pressure for dense development.
Michael, if we wanted to, let's hypothetically, if there were a motion to adopt option 2, could we put that maybe with a caveat or with acknowledgement of the fact that in addition to changing this inconsistency, whether it's here now or it's in recognition of the fact that we also see that there is a need to amend the map to separate that center red area into potentially community center zones and
I just think
industrial zones.
that's something for a later discussion.
Yeah, I would agree that that needs to be more vague, that the planning board committed to reviewing this in further detail at a future date.
But we can adopt one of these and go forth, I think.
And Michael's over there framing up his motion right now. Mike is, I'm sorry, Mr. Cole.
Oh, am I?
Do I hear a motion?
Well, if we talk longer, I'll change my mind 3 more times.
Yeah.
Between 2 options, but I do think for the first step, yes, my motion is, I do make a motion that we adopt the second approach to amending, to this amendment, to the, whatever it is. Do I have to
Text-
spell it out?
But
I'll second it.
okay, so Michael has made a motion and Jim has seconded the motion to adopt
Option.
option 2, which is attachment H to our packet tonight.
All
Is
in
the
favor?
board ready to vote on this motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Hey,
We have 1 nay on the record.
Yeah, and now that that's done, I mean, Billy, I agree, and I agree with expanding tax base. I just think this is one step, and then the other step is to look at some other ways to do so.
We put that on the future agenda.
Well, first, let's adopt the
Yep.
statement of
Oh, I'm sorry.
consistency. Because remember, we got to do the statement of consistency to meet state requirements. So
Yeah.
if you would like, the motion would be to adopt statement of consistency for option 2 as presented.
Do we need to remake the motion?
It
Separate.
has to be on the record, or you can make the motions to approve and adopt together.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna make the motion then to approve option number 2 and adopt the statement of consistency that matches option number 2.
And I second.
So Michael has made that motion. Jim Foster has seconded it. Can we get a vote of ayes for that motion?
Aye.
Can we get a vote on nays for that motion? Thank you.
And then to go back to Ms. Seeley's question, yes, this can be brought on to a future agenda. I would just either need consensus from the planning board what that is. Is it a discussion? Do you want, you could also initiate the comp plan amendment tonight and we could bring it back and discuss it. Or obviously the chair has the authority to add items to the agenda. So board's pleasure.
I definitely think that we need to address this in one form or the other. What is the most, it sounded like, I mean, so I don't think we're in a position to do the map tonight, but could we get, you guys speak up, but from my recollection, if we looked at an existing map, we would be able to kind of see where things are zoned industrial versus some of the other zoning in this area that we're referring to right now as community, the central community center area. I think it would be helpful to have a map, because that's what we would be looking to amend, so that we could,
I mean, there's so many issues we've got. We need to update this every 5 years. We have 382, we have UDO.
mhm,
You know, how do we maintain rural character? I mean, there's a lot of things happening all at the same time, but
mhm.
at some point, whether it's the next meeting or future meeting, what I would do is rely on the skill, you know, of staff to say, if you took a look at this, where would you recommend that we expand the industrial base?
Mhm.
I think we need
As
to,
a future, item for discussion.
yeah,
If that's the next meeting or the following meeting, I just think it needs to be on there from your skilled standpoint for us to discuss. That'd be fine.
I definitely agree with Lisa, though. We need to know what is there right now.
Yeah,
So
Yeah,
that we
that's
can-
all part of it,
yeah,
but that would be.
yeah,
If, I'm not gonna speak for Michael, so forgive me, Michael, for doing that, but you would say, well, here's what it's zoned right now. But from a future use map standpoint, you know, they may not be consistent at the moment, but from a future use standpoint, this is an idea that should.
So Michael, is Chad Meadows going to give some clarity on the conflict in these two,
No.
zoning and comprehensive? So he's staying out of the comprehensive
No.
conversation altogether.
Well, the comprehensive plan's been adopted, so you
Right.
may have heard his presentation to council. They all blend
Yes,
together
I
at
did.
this point. But I mean, that is our adopted land use policy guidance. And again, y'all are the keepers of that, so it can be changed. But so the goal of the UDO is to implement that policy.
Right. In other words, that's driving it. He's not going to come back to us and identify conflicts.
Correct.
So we need to start the process of identifying, we're at 5 years. In fact,
Yeah, I agree. I
we
think
just
the
need to start
first
that
step-
cumbersome
I
process, the
think
whole
it's
thing.
hard to recommend, well, we have 382, so I think it's hard to recommend, and there are still things we can do, again, according to Chad, everywhere, but in fact, I wrote, well, I'll go to it
yep,
now.
not right now.
But, thank you. But I think it's hard to, recommend any changes, adjustments, additions, subtractions, or anything on zoning, make those recommendations. We're not tying it to a future use map, right? 'Cause that's really the genesis of the rural residential area, because we were tying it to the future use map. So I think sooner rather than later, doesn't mean it's implemented, doesn't mean we change zoning, doesn't mean we can't change zoning, but I think that an item for discussion in the meeting very soon would be
Mhm.
from staff, where would be ideal areas to expand the industrial base?
Yeah, what
And-
is the map? What would the next iteration of the map, what is the next iteration of the map going to look like?
Yep.
Not just with this issue, but also kind of all the other.
And I'll just say, because the session law has tied our hands a bit, and because we don't want to do too many text amendments in the middle of the UDO, now would be a good time to dig into this. Because again, the comp plan and the future land use map is advisory, so no downzoning prohibitions are caught up in that.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing now is basically and please give me a majority consensus if this is the will of the board, but we'll bring back a discussion item and we'll just dig into the details. Look at GIS property aerials, see
Right.
what's on the ground now, look at zoning and compare to this and just have an open discussion or forum about it.
So
Yeah.
just to clarify, since I brought this up, if you don't mind, I should have put those asterisks in there. I want to approach this without this, oh, but what about session law 57? Just, when I brought this up, I want it to be our job now, as we know it now, that we are held to this comprehensive plan and future land use map at a much higher level than we thought or that our council thought. As a planning board, from a legal standpoint, we are held to it much more strictly than we understood. Part of the growing pains of a small town, right? So I'd like to go at it the way you just described, without stopping all the time and going session law 57, session law 57. Let's just do it and then.
This is a desirable future use map. How to build railroad.
Right. So the legal words, public interest, that were posed to us in our presentation on training, that public interest has given us that direction. That's, I think,
Choose
Okay.
where you're going.
perfect. So if you're asking for consensus, which you are, that's a yes for me to do the full ugly thing.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
Everyone, in agreement? Yes. So Michael, I think that would be, we would really appreciate it if you could do that. That would be great. Okay. Our next item of new business is to talk about the landscaping ordinance and plant species discussion.
So I'm going to turn this over to Kevin Webb, our planning technician, to cover tonight as one of our internal projects. Kevin's actually done a lot of digging into the landscaping ordinance already and actually has looked at plant species lists from neighboring jurisdictions like the city of Hendersonville. So I'm going to turn it over to him to kind of give an overview of the landscaping ordinance, what we've seen in terms of plant species, and then we can go from there. Thanks, Kevin.
Good evening. So if everybody can go to attachment A and go to the first section, we're just going to do an overview of the landscaping ordinance. And then I'll kind of dive into the project I've been working on. So the first section is a landscaping plan is required. What's this apply to? Multifamily, commercial, industrial, and public land uses. Basically, when we review commercial projects, industrial projects, and multifamily projects, we require a landscape plan. So some of the things that you see here that are required, a planning schedule. If you go down to C1A, which we look at the location, species, and height of new trees and shrubbery. We look at the location and dimensions of planting areas. We want to know the dimensions of the entire parking or paved area when calculating additional plantings for interior parking. And then just a couple other things. We also ask when reviewing a landscape plan if they're going to claim existing credit for existing vegetation. If you go to the next section, streets or perimeter planting beds, this is one of the two main things we look at with commercial reviews with landscaping. You have that and then interior parking. Street and perimeter planting beds apply to any commercial or industrial use that is visible from a public right-of-way. It gets kind of gray there when it says visible because the definition of the street in our ordinance is a public roadway. So if the use is on a public roadway, public right of way, then the street or perimeter planting beds is triggered. I don't know why it says visible from the public right of way if it's on private roads or not near a public right of way, then that wouldn't apply. We look to make sure that the perimeter planting bed is at least 10 feet in width. So with the street and perimeter planting beds, we require, the town requires one large shade tree every 40 linear feet of street frontage, minus the width of driveways and access points. The spacing for those trees have to be between 30 feet at minimum and 50 feet at maximum. We require shrubbery too. Within that perimeter planting bed, you should have 3 shrubs per every 100 square feet or every 10 feet. If you think about it in linear standpoint versus a perimeter planting bed. Shrubs have to be at least 18 inches in height at time of planting and 36 inches in height at 3 years of maturity. Go to the next page. We'll go to interior plantings. So all parking areas shall provide and maintain landscape planting areas within the interior or adjacent to the parking area. So that's one of those requirements. With the parking, there's one large shade tree that's required for every 10 parking spaces. and then one large shade tree required for additional 1,500 square feet of driveway or loading area. This is anything outside of the parking area. Think of the drive aisle and then the parking spaces. So if you have driveways that connect from the road into the parking area, that's considered additional square footage. And then you also have loading areas, so that's calculated. I forgot to define what's a large shade tree. It's, I believe, 15 feet at height of maturity, time of maturity. For shrubs, the town requires 6 shrubs for every 10 parking spaces and 2 shrubs for every additional 500 square feet of additional driveway or loading areas. Just like the street plantings, shrubs must be 18 inches tall at planting and reach a minimum height of 36 inches at 3 years. And let's go to, if you can continue moving your eyes down the page. One thing is parking area landscaping for structures. I didn't know this when I first started, but there is supposed to be a 5-foot landscape strip between any building and parking area. And that can include a 5-foot width sidewalk. Some exceptions. So, there are exceptions where this, you can't apply this perfectly to every commercial project, non-residential, we'll say, because, you got subdivisions, et cetera. Some things we'll take into consideration are the natural land characteristics of topography or existing vegetation. Like, would it be beneficial for this project that we review to add additional vegetation when there's already existing vegetation? So a lot of times you'll see that an applicant come to us and request an exception based, and we'll determine if it's acceptable based off some of these characteristics that trigger those exceptions, like topography, natural land characteristics. And then lastly, let's just skip down to maintenance. Landscaping in the plan, when we review it, is required to be maintained. So any dead vegetation, any missing vegetation, trees, shrubs, are supposed to be replaced in terms of applying to this maintenance section of our code. So that's it really for the landscaping ordinance. Y'all don't have this in your packet, but I started doing a project. I think it was last time I worked on it was last summer. Basically what I did is I started drafting an informal text amendment per se with track changes for the landscaping ordinance. Some things that some places I did research in, with the landscaping ordinances, the city of Brevard, city of Hendersonville, there are a couple other municipalities, local, and the Henderson County. So one thing we definitely need, I feel with what I did my project on, is add a definition section to the landscaping ordinance. A shade tree is not even defined. Just what is a shade tree? Is it, add standards for internal subdivision roads. We don't require street planting, street trees for internal subdivision roads. So any of those street plantings are only required along the public right of way, not for the internal roads. We don't have anything about zoning buffers, any direction on zoning buffers in our landscaping ordinance. It's briefly mentioned in the subdivision ordinance, but for something that's so big and what we apply to a lot of things with these plans, it's a requirement that any residential use adjacent to a non-residential use, the non-residential use has to have a zoning buffer put in place. So one evergreen tree there's no height specification. They could put in little tiny shrubs or little, I call them shrubs because they're not really trees. They, one every 20 feet along the adjacent property line to a residential use. No standards for that, and it's not even in our landscaping ordinance, so it's something to look at. You know, just. And then something I also thought about was to require a double evergreen zoning buffer for more intensive non-residential uses. I won't dive into everything I, put into this informal text amendment with the landscaping ordinance and stuff. But I'd be happy to answer questions about it.
I got a comment. I've been waiting to do this. One problem, I don't have a problem with the trees. I think they're great. What problem I do have is we go into an area, and I'll give you a good example is Sam's over in Hendersonville and Walmart to a certain extent. You plant the trees, that's nice. Can we put something in there that they have to have a clear visual cut height, I would say a minimum 12 foot. So you're riding by. Now, if I'm going to Sam's, of course, I know that Sam's is the only thing there. But particularly in the shopping area, like we're going to have eventually at Public, and you get all these trees and you're looking, well, I'll know where everything's at, but I find that when I go into an area I'm not familiar with, I'm looking for a specific store. I could show you several of them over in Asheville. You drive up and you see all these trees, and they tell you the store is somewhere there, and you're preoccupied trying to find it. It's a safety hazard. You can't find the store you're looking for. Plus, it's also, to me, a safety issue if people are parked, particularly establishments is open at night, and it gives a good place for criminals to hide behind. So is there some way we could include something to require these trees to have a visual height, keep them trimmed up to this height? And I would say minimum 12 foot. That's just my comment on that.
Kevin, thank you for the overview of the kind of existing guidelines that we have. It seems as though, we sort of have a, if you will, a minimum kind of probably pretty standard set of ordinances around landscaping. And I think perhaps that's what's spurred this conversation here. I know Jenny has brought a handout for us regarding, maybe some, as pointed out already in your staff report, that the ordinances do not recommend or identify any particular types of plants, shrubs, or trees in the ordinances. And I think maybe that's the sort of segue that perhaps you might want to speak to.
Yes.
Yeah, well, if you must.
Miss Marino?
I do, yes, sorry.
I'm so sorry. I forgot that one of the important parts of my research is that I did look at a species list.
Oh, great.
I didn't even mention it, but
Yeah, I noticed that you noted it in the
Yeah.
report.
Yeah,
But
I'm sorry about that.
You do have a starting
so
list as well.
So I looked at, I'm looking into the city of Hendersonville's recommended species list. So basically what I did is I have an Excel spreadsheet where I'm taking all their list of plants and doing research on each of them, looking at getting data from NC State's Gardner Plant Toolbox. Is that a good resource? That's the one I've been using to find information on, what's the height at maturity, the crown spread of the species, is it native? What's the hardiness zone, and then a couple notes on it. But I forgot to mention that.
This is absolutely awesome. You're done fantastic work. But it's not addressing the biggest problem that we have. Because these are people that are going to actually landscape. Right now, we've got Bradford Pear running up the Hooper Drive or Hooper Hooper Lane at the cross section of Butler Bridge and Jeffries. I mean, just like there's groves all around like the electrical transformer there. Holbrook Farm Community is eat up with them now, and there's and all of Jeffries, a lot of Butler Bridge. It's the way the wind blows. So that's what I really like to address is this, because this is fantastic. People that are coming in, commercial businesses that we have here, keep them native, keep them, make sure we still look pretty. We really need to address what's going on with the ones that are already. That's where I would like to hit this. So if we, so from my perspective, you can actually still buy a Bradford Pear at like Lowe's. It's disgusting. Maybe create a new ordinance, or just this one, so that we ban the selling of the invasive plants, whether that is something of this list or something that the staff has come up with. I would be happy with those because the Bradford Pear is going to be on there. I don't have to worry about that. The little evil creature that he is. Ban it from like nurseries, retailers, vendors, because Ace Hardware could sell them and they just not know because they're a corporate vendor, business. The county has now publicly opened up bounty season on them. So I would love to see us piggyback on that. If we could either use resources or maybe some of their people, could we use the debris sites? Most of this is in our floodplains. So could we use the debris site next door to chop them up and throw them over there? Maybe expand the public works aspect, like I was talking earlier. Special people that come in to help us. This is blooming time, so they're going to be really easy to identify, and they smell like cat pee. So they're fragrancy. The Bradford Pear is the one that we need to hit first because it is the most pervasive here. The rest of the list we can work down or add to, or whatever is needed. But that thing's going to take over. It's kind of uprooted at this point. And I know we did try working on it in the ditches last year. I was talking to Michelle about that. Yeah, there's just so many. It's overwhelming. So if there is any way that you could give us any advice on getting those under control or managing them, that's where I would like to see most change.
I've got a question. If Henderson County is doing it, would it not do it in Mills River also? We're part of it.
Yes. So the county's bounty is you can cut one down, take a picture, and they'll give you a native tree. But there's thousands just on Hooper's Lane. They do have a top out number for it just because they've only budgeted so much. So maybe we do a volunteer force. I will gladly go out there with my chainsaw.
Yeah.
I hate them that much. But when you go into Hollybrook Farm, I mean, those suckers are they're fully developed. I mean, that's truly chainsawing a tree down, not just, a good sapling that you can just kind of go and get them ground down. So, so there is some stuff that we need to really either reach out to HOAs and make them aware of what is happening, help us clean this up. And maybe eventually do fines for non-conformance eventually or something of that nature. maybe move it into the landscaping aspect. Potentially. I don't know how that will look. I just know they're blooming, they're about to bloom. The perfect time to do this. And I would like to mow them down as much as I can.
Yeah, we need to consider kudzu also.
Yes.
I'm from Georgia originally.
Yeah,
And kudzu will take over in a hurry. My neighborhood, I got all the pears out several years ago. There's still some close by here. I may have one over there. I'm waiting for spring. I might have missed one. But
Well, Jenny, I know most of your focus is on getting rid of the existing, but if I understand, part of your proposal here is our landscaping ordinance needs to adopt something to prevent the next wave of it.
yeah,
So two
Yes.
totally,
Yeah.
separate.
Yes.
yeah, that's two separate.
Uh,
things,
So, yeah, that's what I was hearing too, is I think one, the landscaping ordinance, and it sounds like Kevin's already done a good bit of work on maybe putting together a recommendation for revising that
Correct.
existing ordinance to increase, whether it's increasing the number of plantings or just changing what is required and types of plants, which kind of all feeds in, is an important path. And is something that we have and can regulate because it's already in existence and can apply to industrial, commercial, multifamily, and public lands. It seems like question number 2 on the table is, as a planning board, what authority or what can we recommend or what action can we take to address the type of concerns that Jenny and our member of the public has raised tonight? And I don't know the answer to, whether we have the ability to kind of create a new ordinance that would sort of address some of these things, or, Michael, if there's another avenue that, and in terms of, I don't know what we can do sort of in the immediate, other than getting Jenny and
A chainsaw.
her chainsaw out.
Yes.
There are limits. So remember, the state gives us the authority. We derive our authority from what the state tells us. And in the land use statutes, there's nothing specifically, we can have landscaping standards for new development, but there's nothing specifically, and I'll have to look further into this, about species management or landscape management. Now, there are environmental sections, and I'd have to dig into that further. And I'm not trying to burst your bubble. We have no authority to ban the sale of plants from retail establishments. We also don't have the authority to restrict installment onto private property because it's their private property. Now, if it's a new development that needs a permit, when the permit process is triggered, that's why the landscaping ordinance kicks in and we can address that. But if I own a house and I want to put a Bradford pear on it, I can't infringe on that person's right to put that on their property. So there's limits there. Now, an awareness campaign or a bounty program is something the town can get involved with, but it's a little bit outside of the scope of our department and what we're normally looking at. So that's something, again, I would say could be brought up to council, because again, that would be a town program. And if we are entertaining those types of ideas at the budget visioning session, as Ms. Marino mentioned, that may be a good one to bring up.
Yeah.
It's kind of crosses the two realms because there's landscaping considerations, there's land use, there's environmental considerations, but it's outside of our normal authority and the permit process staff gets involved with.
well, maybe we could come up with a basic plan, something similar to what Kevin's put together here and to start with, then build on it.
Yeah, I'm welcome.
When was the landscape ordinance adopted, Kevin, as you just read through? I'm just curious.
So it originally passed in 2004. That
4?
was the initial landscaping ordinance.
Now, last amended, it looks like in 18, and then there was, all the ordinances had a 2021 update because that's when the chapter 160D state law changes went into effect.
Comprehensive plan had to be rolled out.
Yes.
Is it the state or is it, NC Agriculture that has the ability to ban the sale of certain things?
I don't know. I can look that up.
'Cause I know they banned the sale of bittersweet because it was invasive, but, we were able to eat it back in the state. So they lifted that restriction, but I don't know if that governing authority is. And-
Jenny, this is your thing, but I really foreign to me here, but let it go on the record. I agree with Jim that kudzu is kudzu in one of these words that I don't understand over here on the left?
No,
No,
no, no,
okay.
no.
There's not some other name
No,
for it over there?
these are just like, this list.
I can see
is-
Bradford pear there, but it says Bradford
Yes.
pear. There's not some
Um,
Latin word over here I'm missing?
This printout is actually given out at the kids zone for children to learn about invasive species at
Okay.
the farmer's market. One of my ladies, sent this to me and, yeah, we've got bamboo, we've got kudzu to add to these lists. This is not an all-encompassing. This is something for
Oh,
us
it's
to start
better than what we have right now.
with. Exactly.
So,
Exactly. So if we could add these and then whichever ones that we wanted to be in a restricted, landscaping, containment, that would be fantastic.
Well, not binding, could the planning board recommend, or could town council kind of adopt a policy statement that encourages residents to, again, that's sort of awareness campaign and sort of, and we've actually done some of this already at the park with the new wildflower meadow, which has signage around it to kind of inform residents of what's going on with that. But is there another avenue for making recommendations, or sort of just making it a voluntary measure for town residents to engage in?
I think if staff is working on it and if it's a program, I at least need to have a discussion with the manager and it should go through council.
Yeah.
The best way to do that, you're asking?
Yeah, like what
Would
would that
either-
look like?
Yeah,
What-
so
from-
well, we have some council members here, so, remember, I think
Con-
currently we're still,
Conveniently.
yeah, currently we're still advertising these meetings, that there may be a quorum of council present, because again, council members, some of them have committed to attending. But there's also the option, again, the chair is the designated, official for the board, or the speaker for the board, if you will. So, if the chair wants to bring those topics to council at a council meeting on behalf of the board or Ms. Marino's designee, that's also appropriate.
well, as that designee for Thursday, I'm not sure there's enough time here if I took something to council right now, my question would be great virtue, but what are the details? And I just don't think we're gonna have them right now. And I think the word I'm hearing is campaign, Michael. That really, again, with two things. One would be a text amendment to the ordinance, right, Kevin?
Correct. That's our role as staff, this is
Right.
what we're looking at, is the landscape and ordinance and how we can improve it.
Perfect. So I'd like to see us direct them, or at least request, if there's consensus, to see that text amendment in black and white. And we can add to the list later, right?
Yes.
And then two, the campaign, it's very vague right now. I can mention it for you Thursday if that's what you want me to do, to plant the seed. But I don't know if there's money attached to that campaign.
No.
Or if it needs to wait until we have more information, because
Well, to me, this discussion seems something along the lines of like our dark sky discussion, when we talked about the dark sky.
Yeah.
Where, there's the sort of, here's what if we could create a dark sky, coulda, woulda, but instead, what we can do is focus on our lighting ordinance. So let's try to do the best lighting ordinance that we can. It sounds like right now we should focus on something like getting this text, a proposed change to some changes that we could make to the landscaping ordinance, which would be immediate, actionable for future development. just like our lighting ordinance was. And, like you said, I think that, again, it's not just me, it's not just Jenny. If the board feels like this is another issue, this sort of idea of like encouraging native and eliminating invasive plants is something that we want to present to the town, not necessarily at the budget meeting, but at just another town council meeting, just as a food for thought for, again, I don't know if we have buy-in from the board on that, so I'd love to hear what other people think about this concept, however it's implemented.
I literally think the first step would be like flat.
Yeah.
Let's not go the moment on a roll.
Right, start out with a
With-
basic, plan and build on it.
Yeah, it sounds like that might be where we want to start is with, some of these recommendations that you've already started working on, Kevin, to expand what's in our existing landscaping ordinances that we went through tonight and how we might provide additional detail or requirements or standards around to encourage that we are using native species and that we are having the type of shrubbery that or trees that are manageable from a view standpoint as well. I'm thinking about all those ideas.
Well, if it's okay to add, Chair, that some of the list that Kevin had there, I mean, I couldn't write them all down. You've definitely clearly worked on it. You brought up buffers, to residential and non-residential. You brought up, I mean, the definition of a shade tree, I'm listening to you and Jim and I'm agreeing with, but the shade tree is only defined as 15 feet. So I don't know how much shade that's going to cast. And he wants to be able to safely drive around the tree, so we got to shave it up. So there's 3 foot of tree at the top of the,
Shade.
it's an umbrella tree. So that clearly doesn't work aesthetically, and that tree's not going to live anyway. So
Well,
I'd like to see some suggestions on, again, I couldn't write them down fast enough. I'm sorry, definition of terms. I'm always asking, who's defining that? Because I define it differently. I love that. And I know you had some other things on there. I'm sorry I couldn't write them down fast.
Standards for subdivisions, internal roads and subdivisions,
Yeah.
a double evergreen buffer, zoning buffers, all of those concepts, I think, fleshing all of those out and particularly the recommended or required species.
And I will add, Kevin, that I don't know what the reasonable timeline on is, but it's not the next meeting. You guys have too much on your plates. So I'm not trying to push a timeline on
And
this.
just remember too, I mean, the UDO consultant is also going to be rewriting this. So this is where we want to be careful not to do a full text amendment and incorporate in our code and 3 months later have the consultant write something different. So I think this is a great exercise where we can run through it all, know what we're looking for,
Right.
and then when it comes time for the UDO steering committee to meet, which y'all are on, and when we do get to those development standards like landscaping, we'll know what we want and we'll
Yeah.
be able to inform him and wrap that up pretty quick.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that makes a lot of
Words, put it all in, man. Just, put everything in. It's out later.
With Jenny's chainsaw.
And to, excuse me, answer Ms. Seeley's question from earlier, North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, I believe has
you.
that authority.
And then Layla.
Okay.
So Chair, just asking for more time on this because I am the designee to speak to the council on Thursday on these bullet points we talked about earlier. I guess we're consensus on asking Kevin to present us something and we're moving on from that part of it. If so, the second part is Jenny's focus. What am I asking for here? What seeds am I planting to, hey, this is coming down in this fiscal year. It's a campaign, it's a free one, it's a minimal cost one, it's a what?
Well, there's 2 parts. Okay. There's 2 parts to this that could be a possibility of a campaign. You've got public awareness and, like public participation. So that's cutting these boogers down on your own property, and whatnot. May or may not get a native tree. And then we have the other option, which I brought up to council, last time, was if we have, some local folks that have lost their job, what's happening in the world right now. And these are the people that would be able to identify these like quickly. They're biologists, they're forestry folks that, they have the knowledge. Maybe caveat a 1099 position or two to help us like clean out Hooper's Lane. Or down towards Butler Bridge, or areas of true infestation that we have, so that we can kind of start weeding that back. Because most of those are within the thoroughfare of the actual road. So, well, except for that one down where Jeffries and Butler is, because that's just that's kind of overwhelming. But most of them are in the top part of the floodplain where it meets the road. So. Or the drainage ditches where so there would be two possibilities of that. Either we caveat a little bit of money to hire some people for a temporary position, 1099, whatever we want to do, help the town of Mills River help its residents out, because this is a massive undertaking. Or it could be just a little bit of money for an awareness program, some marketing, stuff like that.
Anybody else? I mean, this is, see Matt over here. The planning board's never been invited to these meetings before, so, I want to talk about whatever you guys want me to talk about. We might not get invited back next year. So, it sounds like this is, and I'm on board with the principle of what you're pushing for sure. I just don't know that we have time to come up with the details to present something. The campaign and public awareness part of it, great. Volunteers, great. I'm sure the mayor will happily ask for all that. Beyond that, I don't know that we could present anything. We're not a capital.
We're not asking
Our
for
board
a
isn't.
particular set of funds to be set aside for this purpose, I don't think,
Correct.
at this time.
Correct.
I think it is more in purposeful use of words, planting that seed
Okay.
of conceptually something that, again, it may not be something that comes to fruition, unintended, this year, but that, it would be interesting to get the receptivity of, again, because ultimately would be a town council action anyways, to create, whether it's a program or a volunteer, any of that. But maybe just saying from a planning perspective, we would like to see these types of issues brought, considered. I don't know that we are asking for a budget as attached to that. It's more like in the vision of the future.
Well, anybody has anything the next day and a half, reach out to me. Let me know. I'll add it.
Okay, shall we move on to any additional items? Anyone?
Considered enough.
For you to put something, you have enough from us. We didn't actually take a consensus vote here. You have
To
enough.
come back with that at a
Yeah.
later point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Additional
Yeah.
items. Okay.
I just want to add something to the, agenda next time. Along the line of what Michael was saying about this landscape and the UDO project that's going on in Senate Bill 382. As a planning board, and as I said before, planning by very definitely proactive. I wrote down what Chad said the other day, which was you can overcome 382. Now, I didn't really define it all that greatly, but he gave us some ideas from implementing green space and those sorts of things. And so I think as a planning board, we would rightfully be doing our job if we had an item on the agenda next week to discuss ways to still try to maintain the rural character of Mills River, assuming that 380P doesn't change or doesn't get overturned, I think we need to plan for that so that if that is in effect for a longer time period than any of us would want, at least we have some ideas on the table for the UDO consultant as to the way that we would look at it. The town of Mills River, things that we would like to see implemented or recommended to the town council to implement, created to stay in place. So ideas like green space. Any other ideas we can think of that would allow us to do what we can under these restrictions, try to maintain those objectives. But we won't improve. So I'd like to see that as a positive discussion.
Is there consensus from the board to hear that?
Definitely, for me.
Oh, we would love to have. Okay. Oh, you mean before? Absolutely. Thank you. I think that sounds like we've talked about previously having, an idea for each meeting specifically to talk about. So yeah, I think putting that on I think we're good to put that on the agenda next time.
Yes, for me.
Everybody-
Yeah.
While we're talking future meetings, do we have flood ordinance conversations in our future meetings? I know you guys are buried right now, man.
Right now, at
Here.
here?
No, do we? I know
We
you
do
are
not,
having.
because right now council's leading that discussion in the specific policy or regulatory direction we might take.
Okay.
And until we get further input, I won't be bringing back until I get further input basically
Okay.
on that. Yeah.
Okay. And the last thing I had,
You're not looking at me to say we need
Sorry,
further input
from
from us.
council itself.
Right.
The only direction we've received at this point is that we're going to be exploring a Mills River specific floodplain ordinance that does not meet NFIP or FEMA minimum requirements. There will be a discussion item at the March 13th meeting digging into that. So hopefully as a result of that and possibly future meetings, we'll have specific direction in terms of policy, and then it would come back to the planning board.
Great.
thank you, Mike.
Mhm.
Mr. Cole, did you want to talk about your June meeting schedule yet?
Well, I just asked if we could adjust the date here, so shared with you earlier.
Right.
I think was one of the questions about one of the things that the UDO consultant mentioned is that to the extent something might happen on 382 from a legislative perspective, there might be more guidance in May due to kind of
Filing deadlines. Yeah.
yeah. Do you have an idea? Do you know? I think that we were wondering do you know when that, is there like a date certain when that guidance would become apparent?
There is, I don't have it in front of me, but basically it's the crossover deadline. So it's when the bills from either house get accepted, or the bills from either chamber get accepted into the other chamber. So if a bill from the Senate doesn't get accepted into the House, doesn't meet crossover, basically it's dead for that legislative session.
Okay.
The opposing is the wrong term, but the opposite chamber needs to accept and consider those bills for them to continue through the legislative process.
Okay.
He had said if it wasn't accepted or some form of a repeal wasn't accepted in at least one house by then it would be here for the year.
Correct.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's why you brought up the June meeting and really wanting to be
Well,
here.
I would love everybody if they could look at their calendar for June to see if in any way, not right now, but for the next meeting, we don't have to have that now, but, since it's being recorded, I'm not gonna say, well, I'm not gonna be here, but it's a good reason unless everybody wants to.
I think May would be the time to decide that.
Yeah,
Everybody.
that's fine. They just want to look at their calendar. If you can't adjust, we can adjust it. Well, I just would love to be here.
And the crossover, I'm sorry, the crossover deadline is May 8th.
May 8th. So I don't have a calendar in front of me, but I'm assuming our May meeting will be just before that.
Yeah.
2 days. Yeah, we're scheduled to meet on Tuesday, May 6th. May 8th, the Thursday. All right there.
And then our next one, I think, was June 3rd. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so why don't we kind of have those things in mind, and we can talk about if we want to adjust our meeting date, the next meeting. Or we can visit it again, and then we can revisit it again in beginning of May.
Okay.
Excellent. Anything else? that
Well,
the-
Make a
anyone-
motion, we adjourn?
No, no, not yet, sir.
Oh,
We're going to invite our mayor to come up.
oh, that's
and-
all right. He
and
keeps
speak to
coming in.
us. Thank you.
Well, it's been a long day, folks. We left here a little after 7 this morning. We've been to Raleigh. So we met with Jennifer Balcom at 12. Straight across the street, met with Tim Moffett at 1:30. They're both willing to help in some form or fashion. I feel free in saying Moffett seemed to be gonna give us kind of whatever he can work a deal with Jennifer on, to be honest with you. And it might come in a way of giving us some time to get our zoning the way we want it to be. I don't think it's gonna be open-ended. We're definitely gonna get floodplain and farmland preservation right out the gate from both sides. But they're gonna talk the next couple days. They've got a meeting. Today's Wednesday, so Friday. Yep. Or Tuesday. So Thursday. Long day. So Thursday they're gonna meet. And so they're gonna try to hash out where they wanna be. Jennifer's holding her ground on some middle ground. She don't wanna give up the ghost. But Tim's willing to kind of help us if there's any way possible. I just stressed to them that we've got 75 or more % of our 22 square miles in MRMU mixed use. Explain to them, what's allowed in there and what isn't allowed, which isn't much. So they kind of got the gist of it. So we did put up a good fight, and I'll feel free to give Kimball the floor here and let him more, but I just think we've got a little bit of room, hopefully moving forward, and we should hear something. The bills will be introduced on the 13th, I think, is what we decided on one side. And that's okay, but just know in the near future. But if they talk and work it out together, the crossover should be possibly a smoother transition.
Yeah.
So it'll have more likelihood of going through. But and they seem to get along good. Both talked highly respectful of each other, and I think they can work us out something here to make something happen to help us.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it could
This is-
be very awesome.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
There's a bill out there. But I'll be very surprised if it's an open-ended full repeal. I think it'll be an amended repeal at best. But there's so many different bills out there from so many different counties and municipalities. If they just looked at these bills, honestly, it would take them a week straight just going through this. And they've got a lot of other hot ticket items they got to get done. So I would foresee a bunch of them getting together and conglomerating these things. Unless there's just a dire need like we've got to help us do one thing, I don't know that we're gonna get the individual bills through. We might see a group bill for this group, a group bill for this group, and then an open-ended one for a few. And I don't think they can handle 50 or 60 local bills with everything else they got going on. I think they'll be grouped together somehow. That's what I'm thinking. But with that being said, I'm gonna go home and eat supper, and glad y'all are here.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Please.
Yeah.
There you go. Thanks for not doing nothing. That was not an option. I'm so glad to hear that. Now, 4 of you. With that, Chair, can I add to my comment earlier?
Of course you can. but
That not
could I share with
open-ended,
you?
that not open-ended part that he just said, that just makes this comprehensive plan, the juxtaposition, figuring that out, that makes that so critical that we're doing this parallel
Yep.
and not waiting until. I know we said we're going to put it out there, but that just moved it up.
I hear not open-ended, that. Do it now.
Okay.
Thursday.
The local bills have to be finalized by the representatives? Okay.
I don't like dinner there, but one question I have is why, a legislative representative in one county that he represents would have it open-ended and area not open. Is that correct?
Wiring.
Yes, yes. In a roundabout way, but not answer.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I point blank asked both of them before this started. I got the solar panel deal. Malcolm and, Mr. Moffett said in here exactly, but didn't go into detail, so. It doesn't really matter, as long as they're willing to help, I don't care.
Yep.
Right.
Willing to help, don't matter. They both admitted that it went in probably hastily and not thinking of the ramifications of it afterwards. And now almost every legislator down there is having to deal with some form or fashion because it's affecting a municipality in their district somehow, some way.
Mhm.
Not all, so.
Mr. Kimmel, did you want to add anything? He did, he did. And I know none of us need to prolong it, but I know that I speak for the planning board that
We pulled up and seen y'all still here.
and you guys just rolled into the meeting too. It wasn't like it went unnoticed. I think all of us sat up a little straighter.
So you could have just left the parking lot is what you're saying. We appreciate that.
We
Yeah,
appreciate it. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, 100%. I'm very grateful for that trip you made.
Come back smiling.
Yeah.
Self-see.
Thank you.
This. Well, on that, I think we might have a great moment now to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
I've got
I second.
Lonnie and Billy.
Remember everybody's name.